Welcome to Humble Beginnings, a podcast where we uncover the unconventional, more relatable paths to success. In this show, we'll share the stories before the C-suites, board memberships, and appointments, the stories of various upbringings, first jobs, career pivots, educational uncertainties, and more. This is the place to hear about their lives from the GovCon executives themselves. We hope you enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Humble Beginnings. I'm your host, Amanda Ziede, and our guest today is Gil Smith, Senior Director of Government Health Program Development at Philips. Thank you so much for being here today, Gil.
Sure, glad to be here.
Of course. All right. So I'd like to start, as we typically do on Humble Beginnings, with your upbringing and background. And I know your story is a bit unique, so I wanted to give you the space and time to share it on your own. But just to start, tell us a bit about your upbringing in Rhode Island and the years to follow up until you moved with your grandparents right before your junior year of high school.
Sure. Most people listening to me wouldn't consider that I'm from Rhode Island. I just don't have the accent and never did. My folks were from the Ohio Valley and Western Maryland. So my mom's side had pretty much the standard Ohio Valley accent. And my dad, his family had almost a Southern accent. So which is where I picked some of that up. So being in Rhode Island, I was a little bit unique just out of the box because I didn't speak like everybody else. And, my sister and I, one of the stories we share from when we were young is that one day a counselor came into our class and pulled us out and took us down the hall and had a talk with us. And they said, well, we're going to put you in speech therapy. I said, well, what's up with that? And then they said, well, you don't talk right. So we went into speech therapy because they thought we should talk a little bit more like Rhode Islanders
Wow.
than what we were. So right away that sort of singled us out. But nonetheless, coming up in school, out of 12 years, I went to 9 different schools, and my mom was a single mom. My parents divorced when I was very young. I was only 5. So mom moved around, single mom. Moved where the jobs were, but amazingly, we stayed in Rhode Island, that little tiny state. So I was always the new kid. And, I started school early, so I was young. And then somehow in shuffling around all these schools, I skipped a grade. I guess I took a test and they decided I was doing well enough. I skipped a grade. So I was really kind of the scrawny kid, coming up through at least high school. I remember there's a banner day, and I think it was 5th grade. I was finally taller than the other smallest kid in this class. I was like, hey, I'm taller than Michael Bonsignori. Sorry, Michael, but, I don't know if Michael will hear this or not, but that was a banner day when I came up to be taller than Michael. And that was around 5th grade. And then, somewhere in there, I ended up with scarlet fever. And that gives you a little bit of a heart murmur, and they get concerned about exercising and what that does to your health. And so that took me out of gym class, and I ended up being the kid that had to get dressed for gym, sit there on the bleachers and go in and have a shower for no reason and then move on. So that made me a little bit of an outcast as well. So at the end of the day, my younger years in school, I was kind of separated out and had to fend for myself. And, I think today that's made me more resilient, certainly than anything. And then, about age 14, you mentioned my grandparents, and my mom just sort of gave up, right, and said, I can't do this anymore. And she sent me off to my grandparents. Now, my grandparents were very affluent. My grandfather is one of the inventors of color TV and broadcast radio, and you hear about the first commercial broadcasts of KDKA in Pittsburgh, and that was my grandfather. So he had a long, storied history at Westinghouse as a broadcast engineer. And so it was really quite a shift in my culture to go from my single mom, almost a latchkey kid is what we would call me today, to being this rather fortunate child in a home in South Hills of Pittsburgh. And at that point, one of the things that kept me, motivated through those early years is I was a musician. I played saxophone. I was good at it. Right before I left Rhode Island, I was offered a scholarship at the Berklee School of Music in Boston. And I showed up in Pittsburgh, and my grandfather said, no, my grandson, my only grandson, is not going to be a musician for the rest of his life. And there ended my musical career. And so,
Shame.
yeah, I still miss that. It's, when we talked before, I mentioned the guy that sat second chair to me in school just retired from music. He did take the music career, and he used to play at the Oscars every year. He's in the Oscar Symphony Orchestra
Wow.
every year, and then he'd send me a text and say, "Hey, guess where I am? Yes, I'm sitting in the pit at the Oscars. What are you doing?" I said, "I'm watching you."
Right.
So, it always gnawed at me a little bit that the guy that I was better than him, and he's playing at the Oscars, and I'm sitting at home.
Absolutely.
So,
Hmm.
but life is what it is, and I don't regret that change in direction. I think it set me on a good course. My grandparents were wonderful people. They were married for 70 years or so by the time one of them passed away, and they showed me how to have a good relationship, I think, and what a good couple in love looked like. So they were awesome, and that was a great experience to be around them.
Hmm. All right. Wow. Wonderful. So, well, thanks for sharing, that journey there. I do have some follow-up questions about that time of your life before we kind of move forward. I'm curious, moving around that many times in 12 years as a child sounds really challenging. How did you adapt to the new schools and new environments? Every so often. Did you have any mechanisms or yeah?
Yeah, I think you just develop an ability to talk to anybody, which serves me well now. I mean, my wife says that everybody I talk to is a friend, um, and certainly in business development that helps. But you learn to just show up and try to talk to folks and find your way and make your way. And I think that kind of shaped who I am to a large degree. It made me fearless, and when I showed up in Pittsburgh with my grandparents, it was just another way. But I didn't have the history when I showed up in Pittsburgh. Nobody knew that I was a scrawny little kid. Nobody knew that I'd sat out school, and nobody knew that I had 9 different. They just this new guy showed up, and he's going to be a junior, and we kind of like him, and they embraced me, and I blended into sports and athletic training, and it was just a very welcoming environment, and I'm so thankful for that. And today I'm in the Hall of Fame at that high school
Oh,
because of the things that I've been able to accomplish since then, and the things that I've been able to accomplish, I think, were because of that change in those last 2 years.
awesome. And what about spending time with your dad growing up? I understand you would sometimes see him on school breaks, and those experiences impacted you a bit.
Yeah, I mentioned that my grandparents were affluent, and I'd spend time with them, and I had an aunt and an uncle, my mom's sister. We would spend holidays with them as well, and they were equally affluent, and my dad's family was very British, so and by heritage I'm almost 100% British, and many of the customs and things that we had growing up were quite British, and part of it was the Cockney side with my mom that rabble scrabble, and then the other half was rather posh and proper. So I had to move back and forth between those environments and try to do well in either one. And the time with my dad was short and focused. So and he realized that, I think, because he would give me, I think, as much guidance as he could possibly cram into our time together, because he knew that's all we had. So things like his mantra of be where you're going to be, do what you say you're going to do, show up, and be truthful in all things. That's one of the things he always hammered on. And also, one of his things was you're entitled to nothing. You earn everything. And that was something I always took with me is, don't come to me with an entitlement. You have to earn what you get. And I've always carried that with me as well. So he is a good man. He was lost him early, but never spoke ill of anybody, as compared to my mother, who just was not happy with the world. Let's just leave it at that. So he was a joyful man and had a great wife and he was just a great example for me and taught me how to work on cars and how to live on a farm and a ranch. And, I carry that skill with me now every day.
That's awesome. Yeah, we will definitely come back to that. So thanks for sharing. Um, Going back to your high school years or your last two high school years in Pittsburgh, in a school that was more inviting and accepting and welcoming, um, what were you into in high school and what kinds of things did you excel in aside from music, of course?
Yeah, I gave up the music. Didn't do any of that. Gave it up completely when I got to Pittsburgh. The
Mhm.
the saxophone got packed away. I think my grandfather hid it. I'm not sure,
Oh, no.
uh, but it was a rare sight. But nonetheless, when I was in Rhode Island, the school was very small. So as scrawny and scrappy as I was, I had to play sports, and because if you didn't, they didn't have enough people to play. In fact, after I left, the football team that was left were 13 guys, and they played both sides of the ball for 2 seasons,
Wow.
and they were known as the Intrepid 13. But I digress. So I show up in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh football's high school is pretty serious stuff. And I showed up, and they said, "Well, do you play sports?" I said, "Yeah, I play football." And he looked at me, kind of laughed, like, and football. They pointed at the football fields down the hill. So I went down there and I interviewed with the coach. He said, "You play football?" "Yeah, I play football." "What position you play?" I said, "I play linebacker." He laughed. He says, "That guy in the corner down there, go talk to him." All right. So I did. I went and I talked to the guy in the corner, and he was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches taller than me and outweighed me by about 30 pounds. And I told the coach sent me down here to talk to you. He said, "What do you do?" He says, "I'm a kicker." so, so nonetheless, I didn't play football in Pittsburgh. Um, so, as part of the embracing in life, I was a trained athletic trainer. One of my teachers in Rhode Island, I think, took money out of his own pocket and sent me to athletic trainer school. And so I learned how to do that, and I carried that into Pittsburgh. And so I became the high school trainer, and that really set the ground for me in medicine going forward. That's really where I caught the bug. So it was a great opportunity. I was involved in politics. I got into student union, student government, media work, TV production. That's where I found my voice. That my voice was unique and attractive, and that I could do radio and TV, and I had the pipes for that, and I didn't have a speech impediment like they told me in Rhode Island.
Right.
Right, I was a good Ohio Valley accent, which has gotten a little more southern these days, but nonetheless, it's so I embraced all those things, and I was welcomed, and I had a great group of friends, and did all the things that high school kids would want to do.
Mhm. Were you always driven academically, even through the multiple school changes?
No,
Yeah. I can
no,
imagine. So, I mean, it seems like it'd
no,
be
no.
yeah.
At eighth grade, no,
Okay.
I was Joe Average, working to survive. So eighth, ninth, 10th grade, I was a solid 2.0. Um, no
Mhm.
advanced classes, no academic awards, just getting by. And then when I got into high school with my grandparents, the discipline was there. So we worked a little harder there. And I was the AB student in junior, senior year of school
Nice.
with the motivation that I could get into college because we knew with a solid 2.0 what the future was looking like there. So we worked on that, and academically it came together, and I was able to get into college. So, but no, not a bookworm by any means.
Who needs them? No, I'm just kidding.
Uh, we
Yeah,
all need them. I hire a
I
lot of
know
them.
it's true.
I appreciate it.
All right, so you got into college, but I understand your college journey was a little also unique. Tell us a bit about how your college journey progressed and what eventually led you to enlisting in the
Yeah,
Navy.
did I mention I was young? Right.
Yeah, right.
So skipped a grade, started school early,
Hmm.
ended up in college when I just turned 17. So I had just crossed into 17-year-old life, and there I was in college with 19, 20, 21, 22 year olds. I was a trainer, an athletic trainer, got a scholarship to be a trainer. Um, so it was right in the mix of all the athletes and all the hubbub that went around that. And I just didn't have the discipline and adult skills to deal with it. So I did not do well. Had a great time. Um, the great experience. Had a lot of fun. Passed a few courses, but not all of them. And one of the things when I went to college was I was hopeful to be a professional athletic trainer,
Mhm.
and I was recruited to Edinburgh University in Pennsylvania to be a trainer. And when I got there, my academic advisor said, "Well, we don't really have a physical therapy program here. What you got to do is become a phys ed major and fill in your electives with life science courses, and then you can get a graduate physical therapy program. You can be a trainer that way." So that was my first real disappointment with the college experience. And it kind of went downhill from there. But the athletic training piece was good, but that led to some disappointment, and academics weren't real great. So the summer came after my first year, 2 semesters. Went to Rhode Island. That's where my mom was. She had and one of my neighbors was from Rhode Island in college, so he was a free ride to somewhere. And I knew I wouldn't go back to my grandparents because
Mhm.
they just did their job. They were retired, and I just didn't
Mhm.
feel like that was the right thing to do. So I went to Rhode Island, and I found my mom, and she was living in East Providence at the time. And one afternoon, I decided, I was going to try to find a job. I went down the hill. There was a softball game. A bunch of guys from the local mill were working, and they were just miserable. I mean, they were having fun playing softball, but it was, I hate my job. I don't like my life. I don't want to go home. This is a union gig, and I don't like it. And it was just seemed like a bunch of unhappy people. And and I thought, I sat there in the bleachers. I thought, this is not what I want. This is not where I want to go. I love medicine, and I got to figure this out. And back to my dad, he always said, you don't need to go to college to impress anybody. Go in the Navy, and that's what he did. He came out of high school in the Navy, and he believed it changed his life. So I took a page out of that and went up the hill to my mom's house and dialed 1-800-GO-NAVY. And I think before the phone was in the cradle, the guy was knocking on the door saying, "Hi, you called a recruiter? I think you might want to come in the Navy."
They knew real quick.
It was right after Vietnam. It was 1979, and the military was hurting for people. And he was there like a rabbit. I mean, he was quick. Um, and we opened the discussion, and what are you interested? What do you want to do? And I talked to him about my interest in medicine. He says, "Well, you ought to be a Navy hospital corpsman. Look into that." And I looked in the book that he gave me. I said, "Yeah, this looks like pretty much what I want to do." And there we went. 30 days later, I was raising my hand and swearing myself into the United States Navy Marine Corps as an obligated Navy hospital corpsman.
Wow.
I went from there to boot camp in Orlando. First time I'd ever seen a palm tree. Never forget that. And I landed in the airport in Tampa, and they had this big glass wall with palm trees outside. I just thought it was beautiful,
Mhm.
and that's when I fell in love with Florida.
Right. So let's talk about the progression of your time in the Navy. I know it also came with some educational opportunities and other kind of transformational moments in your time there. So briefly take us through that journey.
Yeah. With the Navy was a good decision. Yeah, I remember calling my dad and I said, "Dad, I did it. I joined the Navy." He was so proud. So it just consolidated, the idea in my head. It's like, yeah, this is the right thing to do.
Hmm.
And I showed up at boot camp in Orlando. Um, Probably the best boot camp you could pick. There were three of them at the time: San Diego, Great Lakes, and Orlando. And I was guaranteed to be a not Navy hospital corpsman, so I knew my track. And so I went from Orlando to San Diego, another garden spot. So
Yeah, not bad.
a pretty good shift, yeah.
Mhm.
Orlando to San Diego. And then after I finished core school, I was guaranteed a specialty school, and I had selected aviation medicine. So I went back to Pensacola, Florida. Also, not a bad gig.
Yeah.
So, so I'm thinking this Navy life is pretty good. Going Orlando to San Diego to Pensacola, and I learned aviation medicine, which became the real, love of what I wanted to do. And as a corpsman, you could do anything from being a lab technician and working in a lab and looking at blood samples, or you could be an X-ray technician or whatever. But I wanted to be in aviation medicine. It just captured me, and so I went to aviation medicine school, and then got sent up to Lakehurst, New Jersey, and that was my first assignment. And Lakehurst is where the Hindenburg crashed, so they have massive hangars there. And I remember I showed up. It was like the first week I was in Lakehurst, New Jersey, and my first call out on an ambulance was a guy had a heart attack at one of the top catwalks in one of those huge hangars. So my first call, I was like, I don't know, 100 feet up in the air on this
Wow.
steel catwalk with a guy with a heart attack, and I'm up there wondering what the heck did I get myself into. This is beyond what I had thought about, but it was exhilarating. I mean, it was just exhilarating. So I was hooked at that point.
Hmm.
So I knew I wanted to get into advanced medicine, and unfortunately, while I was at Lakehurst, that's when my dad passed. Um, so
You're just about 20 years old.
yeah.
Hmm.
So anyway, I was kind of angry, and one of those turning points. Um, there was one day I just sort of lost my temper, and the Navy has they have a process where they make sailors right when you get out of shape. That's called captain's mast. And what they do is they pretty much, if you've gotten in trouble or gotten out of line, they drag you in, they put you in front of the captain, and the captain decides what he's going to do with you. And at the time, I was what they called a frocked E5, which means I was wearing E5, but I was only paid for E4,
Okay.
right? Which is not a princely position by any means. But reality is as I went in there to get straightened out by the captain, I could have gone in there as an E5 and come out as an E3. And that's a massive change in lifestyle.
Hmm.
And I went into that event, and the captain just tore me up, a chewing like I've never had before.
Hmm.
And at the end of it, he said, "I'm going to dismiss these charges. I'm going to throw you out, and just don't do this. Don't do this again." And I think
Wow.
he had a heart for where I was in my life. He knew what my potential was, and he threw me out. And I was like, okay, fine. So I left. I was still in E5. Um, and then the senior chief, a guy named David Perot, pulled me aside. He says, "You're not done." I said, "What do you mean I'm not done?" He says, "Well, there's a garage out back, and it's full of old furniture and desks, and
No.
and in there also happen to be a couple million pigeons. And
Oh no.
I'm sorry, Smith, but you're going to have to clean those desks up because we want to use them." And when I had lost my temper, unfortunately, I had knocked over a wall, one of those temporary walls that you divide clinic space up with. And I knocked it over, and because I was mad, and
Mm-hmm.
out of line, 100% out of line. But my punishment was to restore some government equipment. So I had to go out in that garage and shoo all the pigeons out and,
Oh,
and clean all of their leave behind off of these desks. So after a good strong weekend in summer in New Jersey, um, I was motivated not to do anything like that ever again. So that was a close call,
mm-hmm.
and a change in course that I came to appreciate, in that I still had a way forward in the Navy. It could have gone in a completely different direction, because if I had come out of there in E3, I probably would have never reenlisted. I probably would have gone back to Rhode Island and been an angry guy playing softball at the bottom of the hill. Yeah, it was a saving day. Somebody made a decision, which I think we'll talk about later. But nonetheless, it worked out fine. And about a year later, I went back to Pensacola, Florida, and learned how to be an aviation physiology technician, which, if anybody's old enough to remember, Officer and a Gentleman, that movie, where there's Richard Gere goes through aviation officer candidate school, and he learns how to, go in altitude chambers and underwater survival, and those kind of things. Well, that's what I did. I was one of those
Wow.
instructors. So I was able to do that until quite a long time. I was able to get a good 6 years out of that profession, during which I moved to Maine. There's a physiology unit in Maine, where I married my wife, and not my current wife, I should say. I got to clear that up. And was blessed with, I found her, and ultimately I was commissioned in the Navy, because one of the things I did when I got to Maine is I checked in to our clinic, and there I found the guy I mentioned before, Senior Chief David Perot. So he was my senior chief that sent me out cleaning up those desks among the pigeons.
Mm-hmm.
And I checked in, and there he was. I'm like, oh no, it's Senior Chief Perot. And I had a little bit of a flashback, like, I hope I don't end up cleaning desks for this guy again.
All right.
But he's like, well, Smith, here you are. What do you want to do with your career now that you're still here? And I was a first class at that point. I'd made E6. And I said, well, I had an experience while I was in Pensacola before I came up here, and I wanted to be a doctor. And I had applied for a program that said, would allow somebody to finish their bachelor's degree and then go on to medical school. And I had applied for that, and all things went well through the program and the process of applying. And I ended up talking to my commanding officer in Pensacola, a gentleman named Frank E. Dully Jr., is infamous flight surgeon. And I went in and talked to him for my final interview, and I thought things were going great. This is good. I'm gonna get this program. I'm gonna be a doctor. And I had my interview with the captain, and we were all done. And he said, Smith, what do you think? I said, well, I think I'm ready to be a doctor. He looked at me with the sternest look on his face. He said, Smith, you're too dumb to be a doctor.
Oh no.
Like,
not what you want to hear. Yeah.
Cut me off at the knees. I'm not very tall to begin with, and it put me down pretty low. So I walked out of that office in Pensacola, and outside that door sat a guy named Doug DeLong, and he was a medical service corps officer. He said to me, how'd that go, Smith? I said, well, not very well, sir. I went in there thinking I was going to be a doctor, and he told me I was too dumb to be a doctor. He said, well, let me tell you about the medical service corps. I said, what's that all about? And he says, well, medical service corps officers run hospitals. I said, oh, that sounds pretty interesting. He says, they also hire and fire doctors. I'm about ready to do that. That sounds pretty attractive to me. Sign me up. I'm ready to manage doctors, because I'm not real happy with them right now.
Mm-hmm.
So he sent me on my way. I show up back in Maine with Senior Chief Perot, and I told him that story. I said, I was told I'm too dumb to be a doctor. I want to be a medical service corps officer. And he says, and the Senior Chief turned around, he pointed this rack of books behind him. He says, all right, I'm going to give you all these books. It's something I've always wanted to do. I've never been able to make it to get selected in medical service corps. Study all of this stuff. If you know it front to back, you'll take the test and you'll become an officer. So I did. I studied my butt off. I took that test and I made it. So I was selected for commissioning. And I had finished my bachelor's degree. I used the tuition assistance program while I was enlisted to credit bank. I took a class everywhere I could, and was still not an academic superstar, but I did okay. And I got selected, and then the Navy decided that since I was had just finished my bachelor's degree, that they would send me to full time graduate school, and it was awesome. I had to stay there in Maine. That was my deal with them. They said I'd stay there in Maine and then go to graduate school, but I had to keep flying search and rescue, and I had to keep clinical hours at the clinic to continue to see patients. Um, and so I had to stay and watch and manage at the clinic um, while I was in school. So great opportunity. And at the same time, I had made chief petty officer. So I made E7. Chief is a really esteemed position in the Navy, and I was so honored to make it. So I spent a year as a chief. I went to chief's initiation with all of my brothers in the chief's world, knowing that I had been selected for officer. So it made for quite a special day. Um, for any of those that are listening that have been chief petty officers, you know what a special day that was. Having been selected as an officer while I was there was quite an experience. So, and then back to Senior Chief Perot. When I put on my chief's anchors, he's one of those that put them on for me.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
it was pretty cool. And then a year later, I finished my graduate degree. Got commissioned as an officer, and that senior chief got my first salute. So, yeah, he's an important threat for sure.
I love this story because it's such a great example of how, you can always have a plan and try to make things work and play out the way you want them to, but they don't. And being able to pivot and, and take the advice and opportunities that come anyways can ultimately lead you in the right path in the end, and
It's the Tyson approach, right? You got to plan until you get punched in the face,
right. Yeah, exactly.
and everything changes.
Yeah. It's inspiring to know that,
Yeah, and I think it's also, and it's one of the things I look at in retrospect, is there are people along the way who change your course, and they may be unwitting to what they did. I mean, that captain that told me I was too dumb to be a doctor, he has no idea. Yeah, he thinks he just threw a sailor he didn't think was fitting to be a doctor out of his office, but he changed my life. The gym teacher who took money out of his pocket to send me to athletic training school. No idea. Sent me on a course that I benefit from today at Phillips. I'm running the national government medical practice for Phillips Healthcare. That's because that guy took, I don't know, $40 out of his pocket and sent me to athletic training school. I wouldn't be here without that. So there's all these little individual moments that through life change your course, that unless you take the time to look at that in retrospect, you may not appreciate it. And even more uniquely, if you're blessed and some of these people are still around and you can go tell them how they changed their life, a lot of them are clueless. They're like, "Oh, I was just doing my job. That's what I do." And then they find out, wow, I did that. Gives them some meaning. It gives them some purpose, and it's really, I think it's something we might all be obliged to do, one way or another, because these folks are important, and it's not always good news. It's like like my mother made that decision to send me to Pittsburgh. That wasn't pleasant, but it's important. These things happen.
And your grandfather telling you to quit music. Was it nice to hear?
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm still sore over that
That
one,
one's still it's still fresh.
but still the right thing to do. Yeah, absolutely.
So you left the Navy in 99,
I
correct?
did. Yeah, retired in '99 as a lieutenant commander.
Hmm. And how did your private sector career start after that?
Yeah, my first job was with American Management Systems, and I had found I think I'd responded to a posting somewhere, and I started asking around about American Management Systems, and the company had a stellar reputation. And I responded to it and ended up talking to a recruiter and got the job. It was, they liked my government, financial, and contracting background, which is what I learned as a medical service officer. That was my specialty, contracts and finance. So I was a warranted contracting officer, and my financial background, they liked that. And so I joined the Industrial Consulting Systems Group at American Management Systems. And that was led by a guy named Bill Purdy, who was a retired Navy captain, submarine officer. And so I went to work for him and a couple other guys that were also Navy, and I took on some projects. And Bill got promoted to be the president of the company. So, Bill moved up the hill, what we called it, because we had adjacent buildings, and the corporate headquarters was up the hill. So he moved up the hill. And when he went up there, he gave me a call. He said, Gil, he says, I need somebody that I can trust up here. And I can't think of anybody that I would trust better than a Navy corpsman and a Navy comptroller. So he pulled me up the hill, and I became the director of treasury for a Fortune 500 company.
Wow.
Another one of those one decisions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So learned a ton doing that. Managing liquidity for the company, 150 million a day worldwide, multiple currencies. Learned about Wall Street, industry analysts, and currency value and exchange, and public company stuff. It was just such a great lesson in how to do business in the government contracting industry from the commercial side. I'd seen it from the buy side as a comptroller and contracting officer, but I hadn't seen it from the sell side. And it was just such a great experience when we sold that company. But right as I was there, 9/11 happened. And, AMS was a good company, and now it's CGI. That's in our industry today, it's CGI. But 9/11 happened, and then I started evaluating, what I was doing. And, 9/11, the Pentagon, it was New York, it was aviation, it was everything that meant anything to me was attacked. So, tough day, really tough day. So I started evaluating what I was doing at this software company, and where I was really contributing. And we had defense clients, but it was procurement software, it was financial software, and I just didn't really feel like I was getting the service contribution that I was so used to. So I started looking for something in government, and shotgunned a bunch of resumes out there and applied for a bunch of government positions, and eventually heard from Peace Corps. So Peace Corps called me one day and said, "Hey, we're interested in you coming in and running our health system for us. We like your background in finance, contracting, and health. And would you be interested in that?" And I'm thinking, I don't remember applying to Peace Corps. So I had to, and they wanted me to come in the next day. So I had to scramble. And it's like, okay, what did I apply for? What does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I got schooled up really quick and went into the interview. And there were 3 people in there, two nurses and a doctor. The doctor was a guy named Steve Weinberg. And I went in to have that interview, and he did the give me a quick review of your resume, why you want to be here, what you want to work for. Asked me a couple of questions about, he was a political appointee. Excuse me. So he asked me about my opinions on the president and working for a political appointee. I gave him an honest answer. And then right after that, he got up and left. He just left the interview. I know, boy, I must have offended. I said something
Right,
wrong
yep.
here. Right? Who gets? How often does that happen? Somebody gets up and leaves in the middle of the interview. It's almost never good, right? Next day they call me and offer me the job. So I guess he wasn't offended.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe he had
so
somewhere to be.
he might have had somewhere to be. So I took the job. It was my welcome back to government, and as a civilian this time, and a senior civilian, and ended up running the Peace Corps health system, 70 countries worldwide, 7,500 volunteers with a great leader at the top named Gaddy Vasquez, who's still a good friend and mentor of mine today. Super experience. And then their management executive left, and I got a phone call from the White House. And the White House asked me, he said, would you be interested in being the next senior executive in management at Peace Corps? I'm like, well, how do you say no to that, right? So I said yes. Ended up going through that process. Had to give up my Florida citizenship in the process, which was
Oh,
disappointing.
that is
But
disappointing.
yeah, I had to let it go. So I became the associate director of the Peace Corps for management, and got my good heavy drink of politics and work as a political appointee, and was appointed in the senior foreign service. Again, an honor that I hold dear today. It just aren't many of those out there, and I'm fortunate to be one of them. So, good tour, had a great time, learned a lot, saw a lot of country. Peace Corps is an agency with an incredible mission that I still recruit for them. Any chance I get, somebody says, "Hey, I could have gone to the Peace Corps." Like, well, you still can. I can do it today. You can do it today. We're all available as long as you're healthy and can maintain your health in an austere environment. You're eligible to go. Um, so that's my plug for Peace Corps. But great time, good leader. Steve Weinberg was a good friend, and I eventually was able to ask him. I said, why'd you get up and leave in my interview? As we became good friends, and he says, well, I knew I was going to hire you. I knew you weren't going to stay with me. I had better things for you to do. So I got up and called the White House and told them about you, and
Wow.
that we were going to start looking at opportunities. And then this opportunity to work with him as a peer at Peace Corps came up, and he was one of the advocates for me to get that done. So another moment, right?
Yeah, another one of those don't know you're changing someone's lives, but you're changing their life moment.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I had no idea,
Hmm.
no idea that's what he did. I just figured, yeah, like you said, he had something else to do that
Somewhere
was
to be.
more interesting than me, and which turns out he did, and where I just blew it and he left. But
Hmm.
nonetheless, Peace Corps turned into an opportunity then to go to the White House. um, Peace Corps is a term limited agency. You can only work there so long, even as a political appointee. So it was inevitable that I had to find my next job, and the opportunity to go to the White House as the deputy chief operating officer came up. And how do you say no to
Yep,
that?
you don't. Yeah.
Right? You just don't say no to those things. And so I was fortunate to go there and manage the transition between Secretary Andy Card and Josh Bolton as they handed over the chief of staff of the White House. So I was there for a very exciting 6 months. Not something I would want to do for a career by any means. You're sleeping with a BlackBerry on your chest if you
Oh,
remember Blackberries.
I do
You know,
actually. Yeah.
um, yeah, and
Yeah.
just waiting for it to go off and something to go wrong. And one of
Stress.
the
Mm.
one of the stories I can tell there is I was on my way into the office, and you listen to traffic in DC because you want to know which way you're getting to work.
Hmm.
And I hear that there's an accident on 17th. Yeah, 17th, and the traffic on the radio says this must be really something special because this accident is getting a lot of attention. And I was like, well, wonder what that is. And then he says it's a black box truck that's flipped over on its side, and there's mail everywhere.
Oh no.
And then I got the phone call. It was a White House mail truck that had flipped over.
Oh
Somebody cut him
no.
off, and he dodged and flipped over on 17th Street.
Oh my gosh.
so so my drive to work turned into a lights on hot lane.
Oh no.
Get downtown as fast as you can.
Go
Um,
towards the traffic.
go towards the traffic. Yeah.
Mm,
So it was, things like that that occur, and that whole operation experience of keeping the highest level office and leader of the free world running on schedule,
hmm
was just an amazing experience with the medical clinic and transportation and mail and shipping and physical security and all that stuff was just so much of a learning experience packed into 6 months. And I had the contracting office there as well. So
That's a lot.
we got the transition done. Time to find a new job. So I went down to, got the call from presidential personnel. They said, okay, we got to find you your next gig. You have three choices. Once you interview for all three, one was assistant secretary of treasury for administration, deputy commissioner at FDA, and there were four: GSA administrator and assistant secretary for administration, deputy at agriculture. Interviewed for all four of those. Last one was with agriculture and Boyd Rutherford, who's the recently departed lieutenant governor of Maryland. So we sat down and had a chat. And I was on my way back to the White House. I called him and said, "I want to work for this guy." He said, the White House said, "That's good," because he called and he said he wants you. Um,
Wow.
so he beat me to it, and so Boyd and I went to work at agriculture for 3.5 great years to wrap up the administration, and just a wonderful man and a good mentor and leader to me as well. So, and he's in private practice now. I think he's being a lawyer and touring the parks of Maryland is
Cool.
one of his hobbies. So he's just a great guy. I learned so much from him, about temperament and steadiness and sticking to who you are, and from President Bush as well. He was, one of the things he always said was never lose your core. Because you always have to be who you are. You can't lose that no matter what situation you're in. And if you use that as your guidepost and you've got a good core, you're probably going to do okay. And President Bush and Boyd, very similar cloth. So it was just a great experience.
Absolutely. Well, so how did you end up at Phillips? Take us to the finish line here. Well, not the finish
Yeah.
line, but
No, I'm not done yet.
right, exactly. Good, great.
I'm not done yet.
We
Yeah.
love to hear that.
No, it's so coming out of the administration, I did not realize it when I took the White House job, but since I had contracting under me, I ended up with a 2-year non-contact with government. So I came out of the administration. Basically, I was unemployable in DC because I had that non-contact. So I put up the consulting shingle, and I took a dive into entrepreneurism around alternative energy, because it's one of the things that Boyd and I had focused on at agriculture was biofuel, biodiesel, ethanol, wind power, alternative energy, biodegradable plastics, all those kind of things. So I parlayed that into a little consulting business for entrepreneurs that were trying to penetrate government. So I'd work with them, negotiating power purchase agreements and putting their financials together to make them competitive for venture capital and those kind of things. And then 2 years later, it went by, and I was able to join government contracting industry again. Landed at Unisont, which is a good WashingtonExec company, and Manish Malhotra hired me to help them grow their business into government, and they are going strong today. I was his general manager for a year, and I hope set them on a good foundation in the short time I was there. And that's where I met JD, who's our executive at WashingtonExec. He was coaching Manish at the time, and I hit it off with JD, and we've been in touch ever since. So not a founding member of WashingtonExec, but darn close.
Mhm.
Uh, and then from there, I got picked up by a company called YRCI. It's a family-owned company. Came through a group of friends and ended up running that company for about 6 years. Um, Gave them a good turnaround and some good revenue growth, and still doing independent consulting along the way. Um, Left YRCI as agreed, and put up the shingle again and joined Deepwater Point and a couple other consulting affiliations. And Phillips became a customer. So I was consulting with Phillips for about a year and a half, and leadership there changed. They moved out. Two of the folks, one retired, one went to another job, who were running their government practice, who didn't have a lot of government experience. And Phillips decided that they were going to invest in people with serious government background. So they hired myself and Kimberly Mingo, who came from General Electric Healthcare, who had deep medical device background and VA experience. And with my finance, contracting, and federal civilian healthcare background, we two were a very good fit and a good partnership to come in and start driving Phillips more competently into the government space. So I've been there as an employee for 2 years, and then had an affiliation with them for about 3.5. We're still going strong. We're doing some exciting stuff with military medicine, DOD, and VA, just helping veterans get access to care, extending provider capabilities. Be careful, I'll go off on my push button speech for Phillips. but it's a great company. We're doing some fantastic things with enterprise informatics, healthcare data. It's really exciting. So if you want to hear more about that, you can talk to me later.
I know it's a shame that we can't do deeper dives into some of these aspects of your career and your life, because it's been really awesome to hear your path, and it's really also awesome to hear that you love what you do and you're passionate about what you do today after you know the journey you've taken.
All these years, right?
Yeah, truly.
Yeah.
It's
So we've had some interesting things along the way. I've not always stuck to the knitting. When you're an enlisted man in the Navy, you don't make a lot of money, so you find other ways to make money. And so I, did some time as a trolley driver. I've
Oh,
done
wow.
short order cooking. I've been a bartender. I was a DJ for a while.
A DJ. Oh, little
Yeah,
music.
put the pipes to use and did that. Just little avocations along the way, and I'm fortunate to have met my wife, my current wife, as we say. She's not going to go away. I'm keeping her. She's keeping. Um, we've been married for almost 13 years, and through her family has a farm here in North Carolina, and her dad was aging out, and one day said that they were going to sell the place, and my lovely wife came around the corner and says, he's going to sell the farm. Can we buy it? And fortunately, my career has put us in a situation where I was able to do that.
It's awesome.
So I am now a rancher in North Carolina.
All right.
In addition to my work at Phillips, and all the mentorship along the way, I think I find a use for somewhere on this ranch on a very regular basis, whether it's working on a motor that how my dad taught me, or growing grass how Steve Weinberg taught me. He was a rancher as well. There's just so much that ties together agriculture, the time I spent in agriculture, Peace Corps and water programs. It just all comes together.
All comes full circle. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's very cool. Well, Gil, I wanted to end on one thing that you had mentioned to me in our pre-call, that you wanted to lead through influence, not through authority. So is that the mantra that you live by today? And I mean, it's very evident to see through your experiences and the mentors and the influence that you've had, why that would translate. But is that the style of leadership?
It is. It is. Somebody told me recently there is no such thing as a leadership style. I kind of don't agree with that, but we all have our own style, just like we get dressed every day, and how we deal with people. It's just who we are. You call that a style or you don't, but I think leading by influence as opposed to authority it's just a better way to live. When you assume that you are a leader because of where you sit, that's a very precarious position to be in. And I like it to be, I liken it to, if you're in a car and you come up to a stoplight, you're the first one at the stoplight, right? And there's people behind you. And when that stoplight changes to a green light, if you don't move, what happens? People behind you get angry. They start beeping their horns, and eventually they figure out a way around you. Well, you were in the top position and you didn't do anything. And if you don't lead through the intersection, if you don't lead through the problem, you don't lead through the challenge, people are going to go around you. They're going to get angry. They're going to go around you, and they're going to leave you behind. And I think if you lead from an authoritarian position, just because you're at a certain place on an org chart, you're deeply flawed. I think that's a very flawed position to take as a leader. I think you lead through your influence, your credibility. You surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, and you're comfortable in that. And that's influence. You influence people. You don't just point and shoot. Um, I think it's important to take the influence that you have based on where you've come from and who has shaped you to be who you are today. And that's where I tend to go back to those instances. Who made a choice to change the direction that you're going in today? And how can you be that person, right? How can you make that single choice today that changes the course of somebody's life, hopefully in a positive way? You know, I would never tell somebody they were too dumb to do anything they were dreaming about, right? I'm not going to kill somebody's dream by telling them they're too dumb to be a doctor. But that changed the course for me, and it changed it in a good way. But I think you can be more influential than just saying I'm the captain and you're stupid.
Yeah.
That's just not a good way to lead. I think if you could just say, if his opinion was that I didn't have the capacity to be a doctor, there's a better way to say it than that. And I think you don't take that position. You just need to be influential and say, this is my background. This is what I think. This is how I want to change your course. Um, there's just better ways to go.
Well, I mean, I think your journey is a true, uh, testament to how you can make those impacts on people and the influence that you can have on someone's life and career and journey. So, um,
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm around for. It's
mhm.
we're here with a purpose, and I think my purpose is to help people, get better at what they do, help them be successful. I think your prime role as a leader is to drive people to success and get the blocks out of their way, show them a way to be successful. And Steve Weinberg, always key mentor of my life, always made the example of the Yogi Bearism. When you get to a fork in the road, take it, right? Don't just stand there. And more importantly, when you're on your own path and you step off the road and take your own course, what you leave behind is a fork in the road for somebody else to take.
Hmm. I like that.
And
That's, yeah.
and another one, these little euphemisms. One of the things that former Surgeon General of the United States said was that when you get on the elevator to go to the top floor, send it back down to the first floor to get somebody to come back up. I think those kind of things are so important that you can't forget where you came from. You can't forget that. I think your role as a leader is to help lift people up.
That is the perfect note to end on, actually. But and the reason why we are putting these stories together and sharing them. So I really want to thank you, Gil, for sharing your story with us, the good and the challenging times as well, um, and
That was my pleasure.
helping us see that journey. So I
Yeah,
appreciate it
lots
so
lots of
much.
folks would say I had a charmed career, but no man does it alone.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you don't know anyone's background until you really know their background. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you. Did you know you can find podcast episode highlights, exclusive video interviews, and tons more Washington Exec content on our YouTube channel? Subscribe to us on YouTube to keep up with our daily content, and don't forget to share and give a thumbs up. Thanks for listening.